After my daughter-in-law slammed a plate and called me a useless old hag, I wanted to disappear. But instead, I stayed silent and started recording everything. What I captured turned my entire family against her, and the look on her face when I hit play? I'll never forget it. "You filthy parasite, how much longer do we have to feed you before you finally croak?" The words sliced through the air, louder than the clatter of the ceramic plate she slammed in front of me. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the edge of the table, bouncing to the hardwood floor. Everyone at the table froze, except for Isla, my daughter-in-law, who glared at me like I had ruined her life by simply breathing. My son, Jason, stared at his plate like a coward, pretending the words hadn't just come from his wife's mouth. And my granddaughter Mia blinked twice before looking down at her phone. I had spent the entire day preparing the roast beef dinner for the family, a Sunday tradition I had clung to since my husband passed away 4 years ago. I lived in their house, yes, but I cooked, cleaned, and even paid the utility bills with my late husband's pension. But to Isla, I was just a burden. And tonight, she made sure I knew it in front of everyone. My cheeks burned as she snarled, "Why don't you just go rot in some nursing home instead of ruining our dinners with your pathetic presence?" I wanted to cry. I wanted to run. But I did neither. I simply picked up my fork, placed it on the napkin, and whispered, "Excuse me," before walking to my room. But that night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened my old phone, the one Jason didn't know still worked, and I hit record. Over the next 3 weeks, I didn't say a word. I smiled when I had to. Cooked when asked. Even swallowed Isla's casual cruelty, the way she'd whisper, "Leeches live longer," under her breath when I passed her in the hallway. But I recorded everything. The slaps of words. The eye rolls. Even the night she dumped my folded laundry into the trash, saying I didn't deserve clean clothes since I couldn't even remember to use soap in the wash. But the worst was when I overheard her on the phone with her sister, saying, "I swear, Jason won't kick her out until she's exposed in front of everyone. Maybe I'll just embarrass her enough that she'll leave on her own." That's when I made a plan. The perfect moment arrived on Mia's birthday. Everyone was invited, Jason's cousins, his Aunt Lorraine, even Pastor David from church. Isla went all out, streamers, chocolate cake, catered food. And I, the old parasite, smiled sweetly and told her I'd stay out of sight. I waited until dessert. When everyone had their plates in hand and Isla stood beside Jason, giggling at a joke, I cleared my throat and gently tapped a spoon against a glass. "I just want to say a few words about family," I began. Isla's smile faded slightly, her eyes narrowing. "I want to thank you all for your kindness these past years. But I especially want to share some words that have been said in this very house, just in case some of you missed them." I reached into my cardigan pocket and clicked play on the small speaker. "Filthy parasite. Go rot in a nursing home. She doesn't deserve clean clothes. Embarrass her enough that she'll leave." Gasps filled the room. Aunt Lorraine's hand went to her mouth. Pastor David blinked rapidly. Jason looked like someone had sucker punched him. And Isla? She dropped her wine glass, shattering it across the tiled floor. You sneaky old," she hissed, but the words fell flat. Jason stepped away from her. Mia, for the first time in months, looked at me with real eyes. Human eyes. Not the glazed-over indifference Isla had taught her. "You said those things?" Jason asked his wife. Isla tried to laugh, but it came out jagged. "Oh, come on, it was just venting. It was a joke, she knows I didn't mean it." I simply walked back to the table and picked up a slice of cake. "I didn't know it was a joke," I said calmly, "but maybe I've just forgotten how to laugh." That night, everything changed. But trust me, this was just the beginning. Because what I didn't reveal was the other recordings. The ones that would crack Isla's perfect mask completely. And some secrets in this house go far deeper than insults over dinner. So stay with me, because what happens next will chill you more than her words ever did. Before you go, if this story already has your heart pounding or your memories stirring, please like, share, and subscribe to Twisted Tales and Truths. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your story matters too. The morning after Mia's birthday party, the house was quieter than I had ever known it. Even the refrigerator hummed like it was afraid to make noise. I sat at the breakfast table with my tea, waiting. Jason hadn't come downstairs yet, but Isla did, her face pale, lips tight, and her steps clipped with fury. She didn't say a word. Not even a glance. Just slammed a cabinet shut and pretended I didn't exist. But I knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was a warning. Isla didn't take humiliation lightly, and now, the game had changed. I wasn't just a burden anymore, I was a threat. Later that afternoon, Jason asked if we could talk privately. His hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee for the both of us. Mom. I didn't know. I'm sorry. For not seeing it. I gave him a faint smile. You saw it, Jason. You just didn't want to believe it. He nodded, shame clouding his eyes. I told Isla she needed to apologize. She said she needs time. She's overwhelmed. I didn't argue. But I also didn't trust that Isla needed time. I suspected she needed a new strategy. 2 nights later, something strange happened. I went to take out my pearl earrings from the small red velvet jewelry box, ones my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary, and the box was gone. I tore through my drawers, my wardrobe, even checked the laundry room thinking maybe I'd placed it somewhere odd. Nothing. The next morning, I asked Isla casually over breakfast, have you seen my jewelry box? The red one? She didn't look up from her phone. Nope. Maybe it grew legs. Jason looked up, confused. Which one, Mom? The one with the pearls your father gave me, I answered quietly. Isla blinked, then laughed, sharp and mocking. Oh please, those dusty old fakes? Maybe the trash did us all a favor. That night, I checked the garage where Isla kept old donation boxes. And there, in the bottom of a sealed cardboard box labeled winter coats, I found the velvet case, empty. That confirmed it. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was punishment. She wanted me to know she could still control the narrative. But I had learned not to confront Isla directly anymore. That never worked. Instead, I turned to my recordings. And this time, I activated the tiny nanny cam I had hidden in the bookshelf in the living room, a dusty relic I once used to keep an eye on Mia when she was a toddler. Now, it would serve a different purpose. The next day, I played it casual. I offered to make dinner. Isla scoffed but allowed it. Jason left for work. Mia was upstairs. And Isla, she came downstairs to check on me. I stirred the pot of stew while she leaned close and whispered, you think one party trick means you've won? You think Jason will really throw me out? You don't know what I've made disappear from this house over the years. You're not the first woman I've ruined. And I'm just getting started with you. Then she stepped back, smiling sweetly as Jason entered through the front door. Smells great in here, Mom, he said warmly. I smiled too, but for a different reason. I had it. The proof. But I didn't play that recording yet. I had to wait. I needed to collect more. Because Isla wasn't just mean, she was dangerous. And the next chapter of her secrets would turn Jason's world upside down. She had skeletons she thought were buried. I was about to dig them up, one by one. Stay tuned, this house isn't what it seems. And neither is Isla. Subscribe my channel to follow what happens next. The following week was a strange dance, one where Isla played the part of the icy queen, and I played the harmless old maid. Jason had returned to his regular routine, pretending everything was back to normal, while Isla remained curt, sharp, and watchful. But I didn't mind the tension. Tension meant she was nervous. Nervous meant she was hiding something. And I had just begun to dig. I decided to go into the attic, a place I hadn't been since before I moved into their house. It was mostly cluttered with old furniture and boxes from Jason's college days. But in the far corner, near a pile of cracked photo frames, I noticed a floorboard that didn't quite sit flush with the others. My gut whispered what my brain wouldn't say aloud: Isla's secrets aren't only in her words. I pried it open gently. Inside, wrapped in a torn plastic bag, was a small envelope. No name. Just a smudged blue seal. I opened it, and my heart skipped. Inside were photographs. 5 of them. All showing Isla at various banks, handing over thick envelopes to a man I didn't recognize. But one photo stood out: Isla, holding Mia's hand outside a bank in a city 2 hours away. The timestamp? A weekday. Jason thought Mia was at school and Isla was homesick. The betrayal shimmered in high definition, printed on glossy paper. And tucked between the photos was a single receipt, a deposit slip for $18,000, signed under a name I'd never heard: Brenda Lowell. That night, I went to the living room and checked the bookshelf camera. It had captured her confession clearly. But now I had something better, a real trail. The next step was to understand what Brenda Lowell meant. I took the envelope, slid it inside an old novel, and locked it in my drawer. I would protect that evidence with my life. The next morning, I asked Jason, carefully, did Isla ever use another name? Like, for work or something? He looked puzzled. No, not that I know of. Why? I shook my head. Just a weird memory I had. Never mind. I needed more. But I couldn't trust anyone in the house, not even Mia. Not yet. Later that evening, as I passed by the study, I heard Isla on the phone, her voice low, but urgent. I paused just outside the door. No, I told you I burned everything. There's nothing left that can tie me to that name. I've already handled her, she won't last much longer here. My breath caught. Her? Was she talking about me? I stepped back quietly, heart thudding. Isla wasn't just cruel, she was hiding something far deeper. And if I didn't move quickly, I might not survive long enough to expose it. The photos, the money, the alias, it was all connected. And I was about to find out how. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Isla's voice in my head: she won't last much longer here. What exactly did she mean by that? Was it just another cruel threat, or something far worse? My instincts told me she was capable of more than verbal abuse. Much more. And the envelope under the floorboard, that wasn't just money laundering or hiding savings. That was evidence. But evidence of what? At 2:14 a.m., I heard creaking outside my bedroom door. Not loud. Just one soft step. Then silence. I held my breath. My bedroom door had no lock. Slowly, I reached for the small metal mirror beside my nightstand, the one I used to pluck stray chin hairs, of all things, and angled it toward the door. A shadow moved just out of frame. Then disappeared. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, Isla was all smiles again. You want oatmeal or toast, Edie? She called from the kitchen like she hadn't just stalked my door last night. I answered quietly, toast's fine. But I didn't eat it. I only pretended to chew, then flushed it down the toilet later. If she was drugging me, I wasn't going to give her the chance. I had to think fast. I needed help, someone who wouldn't run to Jason or confront Isla without thinking. That's when I remembered Vera, a dear friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She and I used to work at the library together. Retired now. Lived alone. But she was smart. Quiet. And suspicious by nature. I dialed her number from my hidden phone. Edie? My goodness. Is everything all right? No. And I think I might be in danger. I met her 2 days later at a small cafe 10 miles from the house. I brought the photos. The deposit slip. I told her everything, from Isla's insults to the shadow at my door. Vera didn't flinch. We need to find out who Brenda Lowell is. And we need to do it without leaving a digital trail. She took the photos and promised to look into it. In the meantime, she said, sliding me a small object, keep this under your pillow. It was a motion-triggered voice recorder. If she tries anything again, we'll have it. That night, I did as instructed. I didn't eat anything Isla made. I pretended to take the sleeping pill she handed me, but hid it under my tongue and flushed it later. At 3:06 a.m., the recorder clicked on. Later, when I played it back, I heard a soft creak, then my door opening, and a whisper, just a few more days, old woman. Then you're gone. I sat frozen in my bed, the morning sunlight streaming in, trembling fingers clutching the recorder. She was planning something. But I was no longer just a guest in this house. I was the hunter. And Isla didn't even know she'd already triggered her own trap. For the next few days, I lived like a ghost in my own skin, smiling when I had to, keeping my footsteps soft, and making sure Isla never sensed the panic crawling beneath my quiet exterior. I started wearing long cardigans again, not for the warmth, but for the hidden inner pocket I'd stitched in years ago, originally meant for tissues and peppermints. Now it carried the voice recorder Vera gave me, always running when I was near Isla. The woman had a venomous tongue that never slept, and the more I captured, the more patterns I saw, the same twisted phrases, the passive-aggressive threats, and worst of all, the way she started turning Mia against me again, this time with pity disguised as love. Poor Gran's losing her mind, she whispered one morning while braiding Mia's hair. I had just stepped into the hallway and paused, unheard, as her syrupy voice coiled through the air. She thinks people are whispering about her, stealing her things. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Mia didn't reply. I couldn't tell if she believed her mother or not. But I knew I had to work faster. Isla was laying the groundwork to discredit me, to make me look insane. And if Jason believed her, I wouldn't just be dismissed. I could be institutionalized. That evening, I found myself in the basement, sorting through old boxes under the pretense of decluttering. In truth, I needed somewhere to stash the evidence Vera and I were gathering. The photos. The audio. Anything that could disappear if Isla got suspicious. That's when I noticed the old chest my husband had once used to store emergency supplies, rusty, wedged under a broken clothes rack, with a padlock that had long since given up. I pried it open, cleared out the useless clutter, and created a false bottom using a piece of paneling I found in the corner. Below it, I placed a small fireproof lockbox Vera had given me. It clicked shut with a satisfying snap. There. Safe. For now. But just as I turned to go, I noticed something strange. Wedged between the concrete wall and a beam, half covered in cobwebs, was another box. It was old and wooden, scorched on one corner like it had been rescued from a fire. Curious, I pulled it free and opened the lid. Inside were papers. Dozens of them. Some were blank. Some were banking slips. But one stack caught my eye, documents written in Isla's hand. Receipts. Withdrawals. And at the bottom, a letter. Addressed to no one. Dated 3 years ago. Jason can never find out. If anyone sees the name Brenda Lowell, it all crumbles. The money's already been moved. Edie will forget everything soon enough. She's already forgetting birthdays. I'll make sure she doesn't live long enough to ruin it. My breath caught in my throat. She had been planning this for years. Not just the insults. Not just the cold glares. But everything. The gaslighting. The slow isolation. She hadn't wanted me here from the beginning. And now I had written proof of intent. I returned the letter to the box, carried it carefully back upstairs, and hid it in my bedroom closet, behind the panel of my old sewing kit. That night, I sat alone on the edge of my bed, wondering how many people like me had quietly disappeared over the years, branded senile, locked away, or worse, while their abusers smiled to the outside world. But I wasn't disappearing. I was preparing. And Vera? She'd just uncovered something too, something that would change everything. She called the next morning, her voice taut with urgency. Edie. I found Brenda Lowell. She's not a made-up name. She's real. Or, she was. I blinked. What do you mean? She died 10 years ago. In a fire. No next of kin. No assets. Just a shell identity that someone could easily hijack. I felt the blood drain from my face. Edie, she whispered, I think Isla's using a dead woman's identity. And that deposit slip you found? That bank account may be linked to a shell company. My hands trembled as I clutched the receiver. This wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was criminal. And I was about to blow it all open. For days, I moved through the house like someone memorizing a map of a battlefield. Every hallway, every drawer, every glance from Isla was a potential threat, or an opportunity. I became hyper-aware of patterns. The way Isla always locked her bedroom door after dinner. The way she took her calls only in the laundry room, where the walls were thick and echo didn't travel. The way Jason's eyes darted whenever I mentioned anything that didn't align with Isla's version of the truth. He was starting to suspect something, yes, but suspicion isn't action. And Isla knew how to manipulate a man drowning in guilt. Jason wasn't ready to believe me. Not yet. So I had to keep building my case, one calculated move at a time. Vera had given me a list of questions to ask, not directly to Isla, of course, but through subtle mentions and passive observation. One of them was, what did Isla do during the year between college and meeting Jason? That missing year was a gap Vera couldn't fill, no matter how many online searches she ran. There were no school records, no job histories, no tax filings under Isla's real name, or even under Brenda Lowell. It was as if she'd been plucked from the air, fully formed, just before Jason brought her home. One evening, I waited until Isla was sipping her second glass of red wine, when she was loose, proud, and prone to talk too much. You ever miss those wild college days, Isla? I asked casually from the kitchen. She smirked from across the counter, raising an eyebrow. Depends. Which ones do you think I had? I shrugged. Oh, I don't know. Jason said you took a little time off after graduating. A gap year? Her fingers paused on the rim of her glass for just a fraction too long. Yeah, she said, far too casually. I traveled. Backpacking through Europe. Alone. She smiled, but her lips were tight. You'd be surprised how good I am at being invisible in a crowd. I smiled back. Not really. But inside, I wrote it down. That moment. That lie. Later that night, I crept into the laundry room while everyone was asleep. I had memorized the sound of their footsteps, the creaks in the floor, the time Isla took her sleeping pills, always at 10:11 p.m. sharp. She never missed it. I opened the overhead cabinet where she kept the detergent, and behind a stack of folded rags, I found her small silver lockbox. I didn't try to open it. I just took photos of it from every angle, proof it existed. Then I searched the lower shelves. There I found a crumpled receipt from a pawn shop 2 towns over, dated just 2 weeks ago. It listed a set of pearl earrings, described exactly like the ones Jason's father had given me. My stomach turned. She didn't just throw them away. She stole them. Sold them. Erased the sentiment like it was a chore. I took the receipt and slipped it into my cardigan's hidden pocket. When I returned to my room, I added it to the fireproof box along with the others. But I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Because every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing her words on that recording, she won't last much longer here. Was she planning to frame me for something? Drug me? Push me down the stairs? I had seen the subtle ways she tried to test the boundaries already, placing a hot kettle too close to the edge, leaving my pills beside the wrong glass of water, changing the labels on my daily vitamins. Each act seemed small on its own. But combined? They painted the outline of a woman laying a trap. The next day, I told Vera everything. We need something more concrete, she said. Something that ties Isla's false identity to real financial crime. If we can link the Brenda Lowell alias to money laundering, it'll bring the whole house down. That's when Vera suggested a bold move, checking Jason's financials. Not with his permission, but through the joint bank account he shared with Isla. If she was siphoning funds into the Lowell shell, she might be sloppy enough to use his connection as cover. You'll need his login, she whispered. Do you think he'd ever let you see it? I knew Jason still used a physical password journal, an old notebook he kept hidden behind the books in his office. He always joked that technology confused him, and that paper was safer than the cloud. I waited until Saturday afternoon, when Jason and Isla took Mia out shopping for school supplies. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I unlocked the office door and got to work. It took 6 minutes to find the notebook. Another 2 to find the bank password. I logged in on my old phone, not the house computer. The numbers weren't shocking, but the transfers were. There were 3 monthly payments of $3,000 each, all sent to a company called Greyloft Consulting. Jason's records didn't mention any consulting firm. He hadn't changed jobs in years. And when I looked up Greyloft, it didn't have a real address, just a P.O. box. Registered to A.B. Lowell. Got you. I took screenshots of everything. Every wire transfer. Every timestamp. And then, just before logging out, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A pending transfer for $25,000. Scheduled for next week. Marked, final step. I sat back in the chair, my breath catching in my throat. Final step? What final step? Was she planning to disappear? To flee with the money once she had full access to Jason's savings? Or worse, was she planning to make me disappear first? I stood up, locked everything back in place, and returned to my room. But before I went to bed, I wrote down everything, every detail of the past month, and mailed it to Vera in a sealed envelope marked, "Open if anything happens to me." I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. And now I knew Isla was on a timer. The clock was ticking. But I was no longer the one being hunted. I was the one setting the trap. The following Monday began with the sound of glass shattering. I jumped from my bed, heart racing, and rushed down the hallway. In the kitchen, Isla stood barefoot, staring at a broken teacup on the floor. Jason hovered behind her, arms crossed, face tight. "It just slipped," Isla muttered, though her clenched jaw told a different story. I knew it wasn't about the cup. It never was. She was unraveling, frustrated by my silence, by Jason's quiet coldness since the birthday dinner, and likely by her growing fear that I had more on her than she could see. She was right. Later that day, Jason came to me with something unexpected. A yellowing envelope. "I was sorting some of Dad's old documents," he said, handing it to me. "Found this. Thought you should have it." I opened the envelope slowly. It was a copy of my late husband's will, the original one, the one we'd both signed years ago. I skimmed through it, my eyes settling on the inheritance clause: all savings, pensions, and property to go to my wife, Edie Walters, to use or distribute as she sees fit upon my death. I froze. Because this wasn't what Jason had told me 2 years ago when his father passed. Back then, he claimed his father had changed the will just before his death, redirecting much of the money into a trust for Mia's education and family investments. Jason had said it kindly, gently, as if the decision had been made out of love and practicality. I had trusted him. I didn't ask to see the papers. I didn't question him. I should have. I waited until nightfall before returning to the attic where Jason kept all the official files. As quietly as I could, I searched the labeled file boxes. It took nearly an hour, but I found what I was looking for: a second copy of the will. This one was different. The clause now stated that 75% of the estate would go into a joint trust, managed by Jason and Isla. My name had been reduced to a monthly stipend. And the signature? It wasn't my husband's. It looked similar, but it was wrong. I knew his signature like the lines on my palm. I'd watched him sign hundreds of checks, letters, even birthday cards. The curve of the W. The hook on the T. This one was off. Just enough. I pulled out my old photo albums, searching for anything with his real handwriting. I found an anniversary card, dated 2 months before his stroke. It was perfect, clean, strong, familiar. I took both documents, compared them under my sewing lamp, and photographed them side by side. I sent the photos to Vera. The next day, she called with confirmation. It's a forgery, Edie. Sloppy too. I ran it through a handwriting analysis app, then confirmed it with a retired notary I know. That second will wouldn't hold in court. Especially if the first one's still intact. It was. Jason had just handed it to me. Which meant 2 things: Isla had orchestrated a forged will to redirect the inheritance. And Jason, knowingly or not, had played a role. The question was, did he forge it, or did she do it and manipulate him into believing it was real? My heart broke at the thought. Jason had always been gentle, soft-spoken, slow to act but loyal. But Isla had a way of bending people. Of dripping poison into their ears until they believed her voice was their own. I needed to know how deep he was in. So I decided to test him. I asked him, one evening, while we stood on the porch, watching Mia play in the yard. Do you ever wonder what Dad would think of all this? I asked. The trust, the money, Isla managing everything? Jason shifted uncomfortably. He made those decisions, Mom. I didn't question him. He said it was the best way to keep everything safe. He told you that, in person? Jason hesitated. No. Isla said he told her. I was too overwhelmed at the time. There it was. She forged the will. She told Jason what to believe. And he, drowning in grief and stress, had accepted it without doubt. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Your father loved you. But he didn't love her the way you think. Jason frowned. What are you saying? I didn't answer. Not yet. He wasn't ready to hear it all. But he would be. Soon. Because I now had enough evidence to shatter everything Isla had built. But there was still one more secret Vera had uncovered. One that chilled me to the bone. A police report. Filed 7 years ago. A woman named Denise Carver had accused her roommate, one Isla Porter, of identity theft, financial fraud, and threats. The case had been dropped after the victim left town and vanished. Disappeared. I stared at the report for a long time. Denise Carver had lived 3 states over. No family. No press. No resolution. I called Vera. I think Denise didn't disappear by choice, I whispered. And I think Isla's done this before. Vera's voice was quiet. Then we need to make sure you're not next. But Isla was getting suspicious. I saw it in her eyes. She had noticed something had shifted. She just didn't know I had already started writing my statement. Gathering the signatures. Calling the lawyer. Because the will wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth. And I was going to bury her with it. The next morning brought a fog so thick it wrapped around the house like a warning. The air felt heavy, sticky with the kind of silence that comes before something breaks. I moved slowly through my routine, boiling water for tea, watering the plants in the window, pretending that everything was fine. But my eyes kept drifting to the living room where Isla sat on the couch, laptop perched on her knees, eyes sharp even behind her fake yawn. She knew something was off. She didn't know what. Not yet. But she could feel it, like a predator sensing the edge of a snare. I watched her fingers move quickly across the keyboard and wondered how many lives she had altered with those same hands. How many stories she had erased before they could ever be told. That afternoon, while she went to pick Mia up from school, I slipped into her bedroom. Not for long. Just enough time to search through the drawers of her vanity. Most of them were empty or filled with expensive serums, receipts from high-end boutiques, and an alarming number of antidepressants and sleeping pills. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a bundle of scarves, I found something unexpected, an envelope addressed to Jason. It was sealed, yellowed at the edges, and dated 6 months ago. I hesitated, then opened it carefully, using a thin letter opener I carried in my sleeve for precisely this kind of delicate invasion. The handwriting was unmistakable. Isla's. And what it said chilled me to my core. Jason, if anything ever happens to me, I need you to remember that your mother has been unstable for years. She talks to herself. She hides things. I've done everything I can to keep the family together, but I'm scared of her now. If I disappear, please, don't blame yourself. She'll twist it. She'll make it look like I was the villain. But I've documented everything. And one day, when you finally see it all, I just hope you'll forgive yourself for trusting her. It wasn't a confession. It was a trap. She had been preparing this defense in advance, crafting her exit plan, her martyrdom. It was the kind of letter designed not to prove innocence but to plant seeds of doubt. She had anticipated my retaliation. She had written this to poison Jason's mind just in case I ever gathered the courage to stand against her. I slid the letter back into its envelope, took a photo of it, and placed it exactly as I found it. But my hands were shaking now, not with fear, but fury. She had turned motherhood into a chess game. She had mapped out every move, even accounting for the day I might finally speak. But Isla had overlooked one thing: I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, Vera called with another update. She'd tracked down the pawn shop where my pearl earrings had been sold. She spoke to the owner, a chatty man who remembered Isla. Said she needed quick cash for an emergency vet bill, Vera reported. Sold the pearls cheap. Said they were meaningless old junk. He kept the security footage. Wants to help. We now had the receipt and footage tying Isla to theft of my personal property. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. Piece by piece, the walls she'd built were beginning to crumble. But the real shock came the next morning. Mia knocked softly on my bedroom door and peeked in. Her voice was small, almost unsure. Gran? Can I ask you something? I nodded. Of course, sweetheart. She stepped inside, holding her phone. I was going through some old pictures from my 8th birthday. You remember that dollhouse I got? I smiled. The pink one with the crooked door? She nodded. Yeah. I asked Mom for it for months. But she always said it was too expensive. Then it showed up on my birthday. I tilted my head. What about it? Mia looked down. I found a picture on Dad's email. It was a receipt. It said you bought it. Not her. I blinked. I did. Your mom said it would mean more if it came from her, so I didn't say anything. Mia bit her lip. Why didn't you ever tell me? Her voice cracked a little. She always made me think you didn't really care. My chest ached with the weight of years I couldn't take back. I reached for her hand. Because I thought protecting her image would protect your happiness. I was wrong. Mia stared at the floor. She says you're crazy. That you're spying on her. That you're trying to ruin us. I said nothing. Just waited. Mia looked up at me. Is she lying? I opened my drawer, pulled out the voice recorder, and played one clip. Just one. The one where Isla whispered at my door in the dead of night, just a few more days, old woman. Then you're gone. Mia didn't say a word. She just listened. When it ended, she looked me dead in the eyes and whispered, she always said I should never trust women who smile too much. Then she stood and walked out. The house was beginning to shift. And Isla? She was running out of places to hide. By midweek, the storm brewing beneath the surface of our home had begun to rise. Not in the form of screaming matches or overt confrontation, no, Isla was too calculated for that. She didn't raise her voice unless she wanted an audience. Instead, her strategy became more insidious. Smiles lasted a beat too long. Compliments dripped with acid. "Oh, Edie, you still insist on wearing that cardigan? It's charming. So vintage." Or, "Sweetheart, don't forget your meds. You know how forgetful Gran gets when she skips a pill." That morning, I found my teacup already filled when I came into the kitchen. A steaming chamomile brew sat waiting at my usual place. Isla's back was turned, humming lightly, stirring sugar into her own cup. She turned, offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I figured you could use some calm today. You seemed a little tense last night." I smiled back. "You're right. Thank you, Isla." I picked up the cup with both hands, inhaled gently, but didn't drink. I carried it to the window, watched the birds while she watched me from the corner of her eye. She waited for the sip. I never gave it. The moment she left the room, I poured it down the kitchen sink. Then I rinsed the cup, dried it, and placed it in my fireproof box. That night, Vera and I met at a pharmacy parking lot under the dim glow of a single flickering street lamp. I handed her the plastic vial I had filled with what was left in the teacup's rim. "You think she's trying to drug you?" she asked, slipping it into a padded envelope. "I think she's already started," I said. Some days, I've felt dizzy. Foggy. Disoriented. At first, I blamed age. But now I wonder how many of those pills in the kitchen are real. Vera nodded. "I'll run this to my friend at the lab tomorrow. Quiet guy. Discreet. Retired forensics. He owes me." When I returned home, Jason was waiting. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice tighter than usual. "Just out for air," I said, removing my scarf. "This house feels more suffocating by the day." His eyes narrowed. "Isla said she saw you taking her papers. Digging through her things." There it was. The beginning of her counterstrike. "I was looking for my pearls," I said calmly. "The ones your father gave me. The ones that ended up in a pawn shop." Jason blinked. "What?" I reached for the receipt. "This is your wife's signature. That pawn shop owner remembers her face. She's been selling off my belongings and telling you I'm paranoid." Jason took the paper, studied it, then rubbed his temples. "Why would she lie to me? Why would she steal?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Because she forged your father's will. And she's afraid I can prove it." Jason stepped back like I had slapped him. That's not true." "It is," I whispered. "And I can prove that, too." I didn't show him the proof yet. Not because I didn't trust him. But because Isla had him tangled in her web, and I needed him to come to the truth on his own. Shoving evidence into the hands of a man still loyal to his wife would only make him deny what he wasn't ready to see. But I had planted the seed. And now, I just had to let it grow. That night, I locked my bedroom door, a habit I developed over the past few weeks. And still, I placed the motion-sensitive recorder under the crack. At 2:48 a.m., it clicked on. I reviewed the audio just before dawn. Footsteps. Soft, careful. The door handle turned. Locked. A pause. Then Isla's voice, "Should have put more in the tea." Followed by the shuffle of retreating feet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I downloaded the file, copied it onto a second drive, and mailed it, along with a copy of the will comparison and the pawn shop receipt, to Vera. Then I called my lawyer. Because now it wasn't about proving Isla was cruel. It was about proving she was dangerous. And the law was finally about to catch up to her. But Isla, she sensed the shift. And what she did next shocked even me. It began with an invitation. A crisp white envelope placed on my nightstand one morning, sealed with wax and written in Isla's looping cursive. "Family dinner. This Saturday. 7 p.m. formal. I stared at it like it had teeth. After everything, the poison in my tea, the voice on the recorder, the fake will, the pawned earrings, now she wanted a celebration? It was a trap. I knew at the moment I saw the envelope. But I also knew I had to go. I had to show up. I had to play my part. Because Jason still hadn't fully turned. He was teetering on the edge of truth, swaying with guilt, loyalty, confusion. And Isla was counting on that. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not with recipes, but with records. I made copies of every piece of evidence, the voice clips, the altered will, the banking transfers, the pawn slip, and most importantly, the results from the tea sample Vera's contact had analyzed. It contained trace levels of lorazepam, a sedative Isla had no prescription for. I placed the documents in separate manila folders. Some I sealed in envelopes marked with names: Jason, Mia, Pastor Nichols, Aunt Ruth. Others I hid strategically throughout the house. One in the vent behind the guest bathroom. One in the back of my closet. One in the gardening shed. If anything happened to me, they would be found. One way or another. Saturday came fast. That evening, I dressed carefully. Not like the fragile old woman Isla painted me to be. I wore my favorite navy blue blouse, the one with the silver buttons my husband once said made my eyes glow. I pinned up my hair, added my late mother's locket, and stood tall. The mirror reflected someone who had suffered quietly for too long, but not anymore. Downstairs, the dining room glowed with candles and tension. The table was set for 10, Jason, Mia, Isla, myself, and a small group of extended family members Isla had insisted on inviting, people she believed still admired her perfection. Cousins, in-laws, neighbors. An audience. Dinner began with polite small talk, fake laughter, the clink of silverware. Isla played hostess beautifully. She served roast duck, poured wine, complimented everyone on their outfits. But beneath her charm, her eyes kept darting toward me. Waiting. Watching. Finally, she stood. "I just want to say," she began, raising her glass, "how grateful I am to have such a loving, supportive family. We've had our ups and downs lately, haven't we, Edie?" Her smile was a razor. But I truly believe that healing begins when we come together, when we speak our truth and expose toxicity for what it is. I nodded slowly. I couldn't agree more. She motioned to Jason, who looked uneasy. Jason and I thought tonight would be a good time to clear the air. To talk openly. About certain behaviors. Before things get out of hand. Murmurs passed around the table. Jason didn't meet my eyes. I stood, hands calm at my sides. "That's a wonderful idea, Isla. Shall I go first?" She blinked, briefly thrown. "By all means." I reached into my bag and pulled out the portable speaker. I had already synced it with the recorder. The room fell silent as I pressed play. "Just a few more days, old woman. Then you're gone." Gasps. Silverware dropped. Mia's face turned white. I pressed again. Should have put more in the tea. Aunt Ruth stood from her seat. "What the hell is this?" I looked at Jason. His face was pale, jaw tight, lips trembling. Then I turned to Isla. "You invited an audience, dear. I hope you're ready to perform." I reached for the folder marked with her name, tossed it gently across the table. "Go ahead. Read it out loud." Inside was the lab report, the forged will analysis, the pawn receipt, and the voice transcripts. Isla stood frozen. Every eye in the room was on her now. Jason opened the folder, scanned the pages. His lips parted. "Isla, what is this?" She tried to speak. That's not, she's twisting everything." "No," I said softly. "I've spent months proving the truth. I'm done twisting. I'm done staying quiet." The silence that followed was volcanic. A pressure drop before the eruption. Mia stood abruptly. You told me she was crazy, she whispered. You said she made things up. That she was delusional. Isla stepped toward her. Mia, sweetheart, Mia pulled away. Don't. Jason turned to me, voice hoarse. How long have you known? I met his eyes. Long enough. But I needed you to see it for yourself. He turned back to Isla. Did you poison her? He asked, barely audible. Isla's hands shook. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just needed her to go. The room exploded in sound, gasps, shouted questions, chairs scraping as people stood. But I stood still. Unshaken. Because finally, after all the manipulation, the insults, the gaslighting, the lies, she had cracked. Right in front of everyone. And the game was no longer hers to control. The aftermath of that dinner was silence, thick, suffocating silence. Nobody knew what to say, not even Jason. After Isla's near confession, the guests began to leave one by one, avoiding eye contact, their once friendly smiles replaced by tight-lipped frowns and shaken heads. By the time the last door shut behind Aunt Ruth, who whispered, I always suspected something, the house was eerily still. Jason paced the hallway like a man in a trance, while Mia sat curled on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees, refusing to look at either parent. Isla remained at the dining table, glass still in her hand, as if she could turn back time by refusing to move. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. By morning, the air had changed again. Isla didn't speak to me. She barely acknowledged Jason or Mia either. But I could see it in her eyes, rage, yes, but something deeper. Desperation. She had lost control, and women like Isla don't just give up, they retaliate. Later that day, I heard her upstairs, slamming drawers. I knew what she was doing. Searching for any evidence I might have missed. But I hadn't. Everything of importance was either locked away or already in Vera's hands. Still, her paranoia would only grow now, and that made her dangerous. I stayed alert. But then something strange happened. At exactly 3:17 p.m. Isla left the house, alone. No announcement, no explanation. Just grabbed her purse and keys and disappeared. Jason stood by the window as her car pulled out of the driveway, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't say where she was going? I asked gently. He shook his head. No. And I didn't ask. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you ready to see what else she's been hiding from you? He hesitated, then finally nodded. I took him to my room. Opened the fireproof box. One by one, I laid everything on the bed, the photos, the will, the banking records, the voice recordings. I watched his face as he scanned each piece of evidence. His fingers trembled when he saw the fake will. His eyes widened when he saw the transfer to the shell company. But it was the T report, the one confirming the sedative, that broke him. He sat down slowly, covering his mouth with both hands. She drugged you, he said, voice hollow. I nodded. And she planned to make me disappear. But not just disappear, Jason. She was going to frame me first. Discredit me. Make sure no one believed a word I said. And she nearly succeeded. He wiped his face. I let this happen. I didn't protect you. You were manipulated, I whispered. Just like I was. But now you have a choice. Jason looked up at me. What do you want me to do? Help me finish this. Help me stop her before she runs. Because that's what she was doing. I could feel it. She hadn't gone shopping. She was destroying evidence, moving money, plotting her escape. 2 hours later, she returned, sunglasses on, lips drawn in a tight line. She didn't speak. Just walked straight upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. Jason followed, but only to retrieve something from his office. I watched from the hallway as he opened his safe and pulled out the house deed, their joint tax returns, and a folder of old life insurance policies. He came to me afterward. If she runs, we press charges. If she tries to twist this, we go to the police first. I nodded. But we didn't have to wait long. That night, at exactly 1:03 a.m., I heard the creak of the stairs. I crept to the hallway and peeked from behind the curtain. There she was, dressed in black, a duffel bag in one hand, her car keys in the other. She moved like a thief. But she wasn't stealing just money. She was trying to steal the ending to her story. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Going somewhere? She froze. Turned. The mask, finally, was gone. Her smile was venom. You really are a wicked old thing. Jason stepped out behind me. You going to run? Like you did 7 years ago? Her eyes darted from me to him, her voice rising. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, he said coldly. I know about the other woman. Denise Carver. I know about the police report. About the fake will. About the drugs. She dropped her bag. You'd believe her over me? No, he said, voice like ice. I believe the evidence. And just like that, she knew it was over. But Isla didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply stood straighter, shoulders squared. You think you've won? She hissed. You haven't. You'll never be able to prove everything. I smiled. Then you'll be thrilled to know the police will be here in the morning. To hear it all. Her face twisted in a way I'd never seen before, rage fused with disbelief, pure fury cracking through her pride. She said nothing more. Just turned, walked up the stairs, and slammed the bedroom door one last time. But this time? I had already removed the lock from the outside. She wasn't going anywhere. And tomorrow, her empire of lies would crumble, for good. Dawn broke cold and gray, fitting for the reckoning that was to come. I had barely slept, watching the horizon lighten inch by inch from my bedroom window. The house was still, too still. Isla hadn't left her room since she slammed the door hours ago. She hadn't screamed or cried or cursed. That worried me more than anything. The silence meant she was planning. Isla never surrendered, she evolved. Always calculating, always one step ahead. But this time, I had built my walls higher. By 7:05 a.m., Jason was downstairs, dressed, tense, pacing. I handed him a cup of coffee, no words exchanged. We didn't need them. We both knew what today meant. We had made the call last night, quietly, through Vera's connection in the legal system. A detective named Hale, semi-retired but still connected enough to act quickly, was due at 8:30 a.m. He had already reviewed the documents I sent through Vera. His message was simple: stay calm. Don't alert her. I'll come quietly. We'll handle it. But at 7:46 a.m., someone else arrived first. I saw the car pull up through the sheer curtain, a sleek black sedan, tinted windows, engine humming like a predator. It didn't belong to the police. It didn't belong to anyone I knew. Jason stepped out onto the porch with me just as the door opened and a man in a sharp gray coat stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Good morning. I'm here to see Isla Porter. I'm her legal counsel. My blood chilled. Jason stepped forward. Legal counsel? Who hired you? I did. The voice came from behind us, Isla, now dressed in an immaculate cream blouse and tailored pants, descending the steps like a queen who had never known defeat. Her hair was brushed, her face calm, composed, glowing even. But the shadows beneath her eyes gave her away. She had known last night she was cornered. And while we slept, she had made her move. I'm assuming you've called the police, she said, folding her arms with a smirk. So I thought it best to come prepared. The lawyer stepped beside her. I've reviewed the will, the financial documents, and the recordings provided by your son. Miss Porter is willing to speak to police, but not without proper representation. Jason looked stunned. How did you even know they were coming? She didn't answer. But I knew. She had a contact. Somewhere in the system. Maybe a friend from her college days, or that missing year she had lied about. Maybe even someone from the consulting shell she had used to launder money. I'm not afraid, I said softly, stepping closer. You can bring lawyers. You can bring excuses. But the truth is stronger than anything in your briefcase. Isla's expression flickered, just slightly. Then the lawyer said something that made my stomach turn. There's also been a preemptive claim filed. Ms. Porter alleges that you, he turned to me, have suffered a recent mental decline. That you may be fabricating these documents out of paranoia. Jason stepped in. No. Absolutely not. She's prepared to undergo psychiatric evaluation, the man continued, but in the meantime, she's requested that you, Edie Walters, vacate the property until this matter is settled in court. Isla looked at me now, her eyes like stone. You wanted a war. So here it is. I stared at her for a long time, then turned and walked calmly back into the house. Jason followed. What are we going to do? I went straight to my bedroom, opened my sewing kit, and pulled out the old photo album from the bottom drawer. Inside the back cover, taped flat, was the original hard copy of my husband's will, the one Jason had handed me days ago. The one Isla never knew I had. We fight, I said. And then, like clockwork, Detective Hale arrived. Quiet suit, calm voice, badge tucked into his belt. He greeted us both and asked to speak to Isla in the living room. She agreed, but only with her lawyer beside her. Jason and I sat in the kitchen, silent, listening to the muffled conversation in the next room. We heard Isla's voice rise once, then quickly drop. We heard the detective ask questions about the bank transfers, about the pawn jewelry, about the recorded threats. Then we heard something that made my spine go rigid. Hale's voice, sharp and clear through the kitchen wall, asterisk, you're not under arrest, Miss Porter, yet. But if these documents are verified, and the identity of Brenda Lowell is tied to you, you will be. Silence. Then Isla's voice, trembling but still defensive, this is a setup. She's lying. She's always been unwell. Hale, asterisk, and yet every piece of evidence has come back verified. Including your voice threatening to poison your mother-in-law. A long pause. Then footsteps. Hale entered the kitchen with a tired look in his eyes. We'll be filing a request for a formal investigation. But I suggest you both stay alert. This woman knows how to cover her tracks. Jason looked up. You believe her? I've seen women like Isla before, Hale said. Charming, organized, manipulative. But she made one mistake. What's that? I asked. She underestimated your endurance. He gave me a quiet nod before leaving. Outside, Isla stood with her lawyer, whispering, eyes scanning the house like a hawk circling prey. She knew it wasn't over. And I knew what she was thinking. If she couldn't silence me legally, she might try something else. She hadn't run yet. Because she still thought she could win. But she had no idea what I had planned for the next family gathering. Because the most damning truth hadn't even been revealed. Yet. 3 days passed after Detective Hale's visit, and Isla grew quieter with each hour. Not meek, no, never that. She wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered. She was the kind who seethed in silence, brewing the next strike in her venom-filled mind. Jason avoided her. Mia stayed at a friend's house 2 nights in a row. And I kept digging. I knew there was more. There had to be. Isla's past wasn't just shady, it was intentionally erased. And people like her don't build entire identities on whispers and aliases without burying something deeper, something fatal, under the foundation of their perfect image. I found the first clue purely by accident. That morning, I'd gone into the garage to search for an old photo of Jason as a child, the one where he stood barefoot beside his father, holding a model ship they'd built. I wanted it for court. To show the judge the man my husband really was. The man who never would have signed his life over to Isla. As I moved boxes, I stepped on a creaky floorboard, odd, because the garage had been cemented over years ago. I paused, stepped again, and felt it, a hollow thump. Something beneath. I pried it open with a crowbar from the old tool rack. Dust flew up. I coughed. Inside the gap, wrapped in 2 layers of plastic and electrical tape, was a sealed folder. I pulled it free and peeled back the covering. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Faded printouts. Old mail. Emails. Medical files. Police reports. All under different names. Brenda Lowell. Eleanor Voss. Kayla Herman. 3 women. 3 identities. All dead. All tied to the same address Isla once rented 15 years ago in another state. One police report stood out, an anonymous tip about a woman named Denise Carver, who claimed her roommate had stolen her identity. It had been closed without follow-up. But attached was a blurry photo of the accused. The eyes, the mouth, unmistakable. It was Isla. Younger, but Isla. I carried the folder into the house like I was holding a live bomb. Jason met me in the hallway. "What's that?" "Her history," I said. "The one she tried to bury." We scanned the documents together. Medical forms where Isla used the name Eleanor Voss to get prescriptions. An insurance claim under Kayla Herman's name. Even a restraining order, granted to one of the deceased, later voided because she disappeared. Jason's hands trembled. "How is this even possible?" "Because she's done it before," I whispered. "This wasn't just about controlling me. This is who she is." Vera came over that afternoon. We spread the files across the dining table, the same one where Isla had once slammed a plate in my face and called me a useless old hag. Now, the table was covered in proof of her past. Vera photographed everything, catalogued it. "This," she said, pointing at a medical record, "might be our golden key. If she used a false name to acquire narcotics, that's not just identity theft. That's federal." "But it's old," Jason said. "Statute of limitations?" "Maybe on some of it," Vera replied. "But not all. And not if we can prove she's still committing the same crimes today." And we could. Because just the night before, Mia had overheard her mother on the phone, saying, "I need another script. Same name, same dosage. I'm telling you, she's getting suspicious. If she finds the pills, I'm screwed." Mia had recorded it. Without being asked. She sent it to me with a message that made my heart twist. "I believe you now. All of it. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." I wept. Quietly. Alone. Then I gathered myself. Because the battle wasn't done. That evening, Isla walked into the living room like nothing had changed. She poured herself a drink, sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and smiled. "Still enjoying your little scavenger hunt?" Jason didn't answer. I did. "We found your ghosts, Isla." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you mean." I slid the folder across the coffee table. She didn't touch it. 3 names, I said. 3 lives. 3 women who vanished after accusing you of fraud. One of them filed a police report before she disappeared. She laughed, dry and sharp. "You think anyone's going to believe I killed people? I think they'll believe you've stolen identities. Forged prescriptions. Committed fraud across state lines. Because the evidence doesn't lie. Not like you." Jason stepped forward. "I already sent it all to the DA's office." Her face changed. Just slightly. A blink. A twitch. A flicker of panic behind the cool facade. You should have just stayed in your room and died like you were supposed to, she said, voice flat and cold. I didn't flinch. You've taken so much from me. My peace. My dignity. My son. But what you didn't take is my fire. She stood abruptly, the glass falling from her hand and shattering against the floor. You think this is over? You have no idea who I am. Oh, I whispered, stepping closer, I know exactly who you are. And so does the court now. She stormed out of the room. That night, we changed the locks. Because the next time Isla walked through that door, it would be in handcuffs. And I would be waiting. Not with fear. But with the truth. 2 days later, the morning sun rose over the house like it had something to prove. The air was too still again, like the moment before a piano string snaps. Jason had taken Mia to school himself. He wanted her far away from the storm. Isla hadn't come downstairs. Not since the night we exposed the folder. Her bedroom door remained closed. She hadn't spoken a word to either of us, hadn't cooked, hadn't screamed. Her silence had shifted from simmering rage to something else entirely, strategic withdrawal. But I knew better than to think she was done. Women like Isla don't stop until they've scorched the earth. At 10:02 a.m., the doorbell rang. I was ready. I opened it slowly and found 2 plainclothes officers, Detective Hale and a younger officer whose badge I barely glanced at because all I could see was the paper Hale held in his hand. He nodded to me politely. Is she here? She's upstairs, I said. She hasn't left the house since Sunday. Good, Hale said. We have a warrant. Jason came down the stairs just as the detective stepped inside. He looked at Hale, eyes bloodshot, face tense. Will this protect my daughter? If she tries to twist things? Hale nodded. We've filed an emergency injunction. She's not leaving the state, and if she tries, we'll know. Your daughter is protected. I watched as Hale climbed the stairs. I followed behind, each step heavier than the last. We reached the landing. Hale knocked once. Ms. Isla Porter? This is Detective Hale with the county precinct. I have a warrant for your arrest. Please open the door. No answer. Another knock. Harder. Miss Porter, if you don't open this door, we will open it for you. Still nothing. Hale turned to the other officer and nodded. Within seconds, a toolkit came out. The lock was popped. The door swung open. And there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed in a white blouse and slacks, wrists resting calmly on her lap, eyes hollow and unreadable. Her suitcase sat beside her. I figured it would be you, she said quietly. Hale stepped forward. Isla Porter, you are under arrest for identity theft, insurance fraud, and possession of a controlled substance under a false name. Additional charges may follow pending investigation. He read her rights. She didn't flinch. Not even as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Only when she stood did she turn to me. Her voice, for once, wasn't venomous. It was low, dangerous, almost detached. You think you've won, but you've only just opened the door to a mess that will haunt this family for the rest of its life. I stepped closer. Maybe. But at least now, I'll be alive to walk through it. And Mia won't grow up thinking that cruelty is normal. She narrowed her eyes at Jason. You're a fool. Jason didn't speak. He only looked away. They led her downstairs. Past the photos she once pretended to cherish. Past the hallway she'd turned into her runway of dominance. Past the kitchen table where she humiliated me in front of my own family. The cuffs glinted under the sunlight as she passed the window. She was no longer the queen of this house. Outside, the neighbors stared. Vera stood at the end of the driveway, arms crossed. She didn't smile. Just nodded once, firmly, as Isla was placed in the back of the cruiser. And then, the door closed. The car pulled away. And silence followed. Real silence. Not the tense, oppressive kind. Not the silence filled with fear or footsteps or whispered threats through locked doors. But silence, with peace at its edges. Jason sat at the kitchen table and cried for a long time. Not just for Isla. But for the years. For the blindness. For what he allowed. For the mother he forgot. I sat beside him and took his hand. We didn't speak. Because some grief doesn't need words. And some victories come dressed in quiet. But it wasn't over yet. There was still court. Still damage to unwind. Still a granddaughter to help unlearn what she thought was love. And one final truth that even I wasn't ready to admit. Because the real twist, the one Isla didn't know, was hidden in a voicemail I'd never played. Left by someone who knew her long before she was Isla. And that voice would change everything. 2 days after Isla's arrest, the house felt like a crime scene where the yellow tape had been taken down but the shadows still lingered. Everything looked the same, my teacup still lined the kitchen shelf, Jason's muddy boots still sat by the door, but the air had changed. It was lighter, quieter, but not yet peaceful. Peace would take time. Trust would take even longer. Jason was doing his best, checking on me constantly, cooking scrambled eggs like he was trying to make up for years of silence with salt and butter. But we both knew there were still cracks beneath the surface that neither of us had dared to inspect. It was Vera who reminded me of the voicemail. She called that morning. "Edie, I was going through the second burner phone, the one you said you hadn't used in years. You gave it to me with the others, remember?" "I remember," I said, leaning into the windowsill as the sun crept up the side of the porch. "Well, there's a saved voicemail. From 6 months ago. I only noticed it because it was tagged as urgent. And it's not your voice." I sat down. Hard. "Can you play it?" I whispered. "I already sent it to your email." "But..." "Edie, brace yourself. This isn't from Isla. It's about her." I opened the file on my old laptop. The audio was scratchy at first, like someone was calling from an old pay phone. Then a voice came through, female, middle-aged, shaky but deliberate. "Edie Walters, you don't know me, but I know who's living in your house. Her name isn't Isla Porter. It used to be Lillian Grant. I knew her in 2009, when she lived in Nevada under the name Brenda Lowell. She's dangerous. She destroyed my sister's life. Please, don't trust her." I tried going to the police, but they dropped it when she disappeared. "I have proof. But I'm scared. If you get this, please call me. I can help." There was a beep, then silence. I just sat there, staring at the screen, heart pounding. The voice didn't say her name. The number was now disconnected when I tried calling it back. But I knew, deep in my bones, that this was one of the ghosts Isla thought she had silenced. Jason came in to find me staring at the screen. "She was Lillian Grant," I said softly. He blinked. "What?" "That's the name she was born with." Vera tracked down an old school record after matching the voice to a missing persons alert from back in 2010. Isla's been living under stolen names for nearly 2 decades. And this voicemail, this proves that someone tried to stop her before she got to us. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "What does this mean? For court?" "It means we can tie her to a pattern," I said. "This wasn't one crime. This was a lifetime of deception. A system. And she's been doing it to vulnerable people, women. Families. Over and over." Jason's face darkened. "And I brought her into ours." I looked at him, heart heavy. "You didn't know. But now that you do, we make sure she never does it again." We sent the voicemail to Hale. He was stunned. "This changes things," he said. "If we can match her fingerprints from any of these old identities, we could expand the charges. Possibly bring in federal investigators." That night, I sat alone in my room, clutching the locket I hadn't taken off in weeks. I thought about all the moments I had swallowed my voice. All the times I let myself be made small so others could feel large. And how close I came to being erased, not by death, but by a carefully constructed story meant to convince the world that I was nothing. But now, the story was mine again. And Isla, Lillian, Brenda, Kayla, whoever she tried to be, was about to lose the last mask she had left. Because ghosts don't stay buried forever. Especially when they leave voicemails. And I was done being quiet. The courthouse was a cold, echoing cathedral of truth and performance. Long, gray walls. Benches that creaked with every weight of regret. I sat in the front row, Vera beside me, Jason a few seats down with his hands clasped so tightly they were bloodless. The courtroom was packed, not with reporters or cameras, this wasn't national news, but with family, neighbors, and former friends who had once sipped wine with Isla and now came to watch her name crack open under oath. But that was the thing. It wasn't her name. Isla Porter was not on trial. Lillian Grant was. The prosecution began with documentation, carefully arranged, plainly explained. First, the identity theft trail. The forged signatures. The money that disappeared into shell companies. Then came the medical fraud, the prescriptions filled under the name Brenda Lowell, some of which had been traced back to overdoses and flagged as part of a broader pattern. They even unearthed a federal case from another state, previously closed due to lack of evidence, that now fit perfectly into the puzzle. Jason testified. His voice wavered only once, when asked if he ever suspected her of manipulating his daughter. He looked at the prosecutor, then at me, and whispered, "I didn't want to believe anyone could be that cruel, until I heard her voice in those recordings." Then it was my turn. The defense tried to paint me as unstable. Elderly. Prone to confusion. "Didn't you once claim she poisoned your tea without ever having proof of consumption?" the lawyer asked with an oily smirk. I smiled calmly. "No. I never drank it. But I saved the cup. And the lab found lorazepam in it." "Do you need the report again, counselor?" He didn't. I told the jury everything. From the roast beef dinner where she called me a burden to the whisper at my bedroom door. From the pawned pearls to the will she forged using my husband's dead hand. I spoke plainly, without drama, and let the evidence do the work. Then came the voicemail. It played in the room like the voice of a ghost rising from beneath the floorboards. The woman, still unidentified, warning me about Lillian Grant. About the lives she had broken. About the sister who disappeared after daring to speak up. The room was silent when it ended. Even the judge blinked twice. And then Isla took the stand. No longer in silk blouses or lipstick red heels. She wore a beige jumpsuit, her hair flattened, her wrists still marked from the handcuffs. She tried to smile. She tried to sound rational. But she underestimated one thing: exhaustion. The jury wasn't angry, they were tired. Tired of lies. Of half-truths. Of the way her words twisted into perfect little knots and then unraveled with every contradiction. She claimed her past wasn't criminal, just misunderstood. She said I had become obsessive, that Jason was pressured by his mother to believe lies, and that any manipulation she may have engaged in was an act of love gone wrong. But then the prosecutor held up the photo, one we hadn't shown until now. The blurry but damning image of Lillian Grant beside Denise Carver, dated 15 years ago. The last known photo before Denise vanished. The room froze. Isla's lips parted. Her mouth twitched. She almost said something. But she didn't. Because she knew. It was over. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty. On every count. The judge didn't smile. "Ms. Grant, you built a life on ashes and lies. You assumed the elderly were easy prey. That love could be manipulated. That erasure would cover your crimes. You were wrong. Sentencing will follow, but until then, you are remanded without bail." As the bailiff took her hand again, I stood. Not in triumph. Not in vengeance. But in quiet reclaiming of everything she tried to take from me. As she passed me in chains, she muttered, "I should have finished the tea." I looked her dead in the eye. "But you didn't." And now, she never would. But even after a guilty verdict, the real healing was still ahead. Because Mia hadn't spoken to anyone since the day of the arrest. And the words she finally said to me tore me open more than any insult Isla had ever hurled. The trial was over. The verdict had been delivered. Isla, Lillian, was gone, locked behind a wall she could no longer charm her way through. And yet, the house still didn't feel safe. Because while justice had been served, wounds don't seal the moment the gavel drops. Not the kind Isla left behind. Some wounds get passed down like heirlooms. And Mia was my wound that hadn't healed. She came home the night after the sentencing. Quiet. Eyes ringed with dark shadows. 14 years old and already carrying the weight of betrayal no child should ever know. Jason picked her up from a friend's house, but she didn't speak on the drive. She walked past me in the hallway, offered a faint nod, then locked herself in her room. I waited. I didn't knock. Didn't press. She'd been manipulated, molded by Isla's venom for years. I had to give her space to figure out what was hers and what had been fed to her. It was after midnight when I heard the soft knock on my door. I opened it to find her standing barefoot, wrapped in an old hoodie of Jason's that swallowed her frame. She looked like a child again. Small. Frightened. Raw. Can I sit with you?" she asked. I nodded. We sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't push, only listens. Then she whispered, "She used to tell me you were dangerous." I looked at her, my heart aching. "I know. She said you hated me. That you were trying to turn Dad against me. That you were jealous." I bit my lip to keep it from trembling. "And did you believe her?" Mia stared at the floor. "At first, no. But she made everything feel so real. If I said I liked the way you made pancakes, she'd punish me. If I hugged you, she'd ignore me for a day. I learned to stop talking about you. Even when I missed you." I reached out slowly, placing my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "I didn't know how to stop her," she said, voice cracking. And then I started thinking maybe she was right. Maybe you were trying to take her place. Maybe I didn't need you anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. "But when you played that recording, the one where she said you wouldn't last much longer, I felt sick. Because I knew, if something had happened to you, it would have been my fault too." "No," I said firmly, lifting her chin so she'd look at me. "Mia, none of this is your fault. You were a child. You were manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to control hearts. That's not on you. I said awful things to you," she whispered. "I called you useless. I laughed when she said you should be in a home. I even told my friends once that you smelled like dust and regret." A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't cry because of her words. I cried because she remembered them. Because they haunted her. And because I had waited so long to hear what she said next. "I'm sorry, Gran." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her like I did when she was little, when she had skin knees and tangled braids and Isla hadn't yet rewired her soul. "I love you, Mia," I whispered into her hair. I never stopped. Not for a second. She cried then. Deep, heavy sobs. Not the kind children cry when they fall, but the kind they cry when they see, clearly, for the first time. "I want to be better than her," she said. "I want to undo what she did to me." "You already are," I told her. "And we'll heal together." We stayed like that for a long time. Two broken women, bridging the gap between them one truth at a time. The next morning, Mia asked if she could go through the old family albums with me. We spent hours looking at photos. She laughed when she saw Jason in overalls, gasped at a picture of me holding her when she was just a week old. "You looked so strong," she said. "I had to be," I replied. And I still had to be. Because Isla's sentencing wasn't the end. There was one more courtroom to face. The civil suit. To reclaim the inheritance she had tried to steal. To restore my name not just in law, but in legacy. And I would need Mia by my side for that final fight. Not just as my granddaughter, but as my proof that healing was not only possible, it was already beginning. The civil suit began quietly, with none of the tension that had clung to the criminal trial. No shackles. No dramatic testimony. Just paperwork, old lawyers with tired eyes, and cold calculations. This wasn't about guilt, it was about what was left behind. Property. Pension. Bank accounts. Everything my husband had intended for me, and everything Isla had tried to forge into her own. I sat beside my attorney in a navy blue blazer that had belonged to my mother. It made me feel armored, like the generations of women who came before me were sitting with me in that courtroom. Jason sat behind me with Mia. She never let go of his hand. The defense argued procedural nonsense, that my husband's revised will should still be considered valid. That he had intended to create a trust under Isla's guidance. That my claims were emotional and lacking legal clarity. But then we presented the handwriting analysis. The side-by-side comparisons of my husband's real signature and the one on the forged will. The audio recordings of Isla admitting to manipulating finances. The pawn receipts. The fraudulent withdrawals. The proof that she had siphoned over $120,000 from Jason's accounts under false names. And finally, the original will. Signed. Notarized. Untouched. Leaving everything to me. It wasn't even a contest. The judge ruled swiftly. The court finds that the revised will presented was indeed a forgery. All assets tied to Isla Porter, also known as Lillian Grant, are to be frozen and recovered. Full control of the estate reverts to the surviving spouse, Edith Walters, as per the original will. Restitution will follow pending final review. When the gavel fell, it didn't sound like justice. It sounded like freedom. But strangely, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. After the proceedings, Jason and I stood in the hallway. The buzz of legal conversations passed us by, unnoticed. He looked at me, eyes red. "I don't know how you forgave me, Mom." "I didn't need to forgive you," I said. "I needed you to wake up." "And you did." He nodded. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I placed a hand on his cheek. "Then spend it being a good father. To Mia. To yourself." Then Mia stepped forward, holding a small frame. It was a photo she'd taken from one of our albums, her, nestled in my arms, maybe 2 or 3 years old, face smeared with cake, both of us laughing. "I want this in my room," she said. "So I never forget who you were before Mom started lying." I held the frame for a long time. That woman was strong. But this one? I smiled. This one's unbreakable. We returned home that night not to a house of ghosts, but to a home in recovery. Vera came by with soup. Jason started working on fixing up the old garden bench my husband built. Mia asked if she could help me repaint the front door. "Something brighter," she said. "Like a new beginning." We chose soft yellow. That weekend, as the sun set behind the trees, I sat on that garden bench, one leg tucked under me, a cup of tea in my hand, that I made, and watched Mia and Jason laugh while planting flowers. They laughed differently now. Not guarded. Not pretending. But freely. And I realized, that was the victory. Not the money. Not the property. Not even the courtroom win. It was this. Laughter returned to my house. My granddaughter smiling again. My son learning to be a protector instead of an observer. Isla may have taken years from me. But she didn't take everything. She didn't take who I am. And no matter what the world thinks of women like me, older, quieter, worn by time, I proved that you can bend without breaking. And if someone tries to bury you, you rise. You rise stronger than before. And you take your name back, one truth at a time. But there was still one thing left to do. One place I needed to return to. Because not all healing happens in court. Sometimes, it happens at a dinner table. With the right words. At the right time. And this time, I would be the one setting the table. Not to serve a meal, but to serve a legacy. 6 months had passed since the day Lillian, was led away in handcuffs, still convinced that she'd find a way to slither free. She hadn't. She was sentenced to 18 years with no parole for identity theft, fraud, and possession of narcotics with intent to harm. There were whispers that federal investigators were digging into older cold cases she may have been involved in. Let them. I had done what I came to do. But even with her gone, the echoes of her voice still lingered in certain corners of our home, especially the dining room. That room had been her stage. Her throne. The place where she first shattered my dignity in front of my family, slamming down a plate and calling me a parasite. That moment had started it all. So I decided that was where I'd end it, too. I planned it with intention. Not revenge. But restoration. I sent out the invitations myself, handwritten, just like I used to do for birthdays and anniversaries before Lillian took over every corner of this family's rhythm. Jason's cousins, Aunt Ruth, the neighbors who had watched Isla smile her way into their trust, all of them were invited to my table. The same table where I had once sat in silence, humiliated, pretending not to hurt. This time, it would be mine. The evening of the dinner, I wore deep plum, a color my husband once said made me look dangerous in the best way. The dining room glowed with soft candlelight, and the air smelled of rosemary chicken and baked apples, a scent that had once meant home before Isla twisted it into obligation. Guests arrived slowly, cautiously at first. Some hadn't seen me since the trial. They looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with respect. Even awe. Aunt Ruth hugged me tightly and whispered, "You showed us all how it's done." By 7, everyone had arrived. Even Vera, who stood by the window sipping cider, watching the family she helped save come back to life. When we sat down, the conversation was light at first: childhood stories, Jason's new job at the community center, Mia's recent essay about resilience that had won a district award. But then, as the main course cleared, I stood. My hands didn't shake. "I wanted to host tonight's dinner," I began, "because this table used to be a place of silence. Of power used cruelly. Of words thrown like weapons." I glanced around the room. Some of you were here the night she called me useless. Some of you believed her. Some of you stayed quiet. A few heads bowed. "I don't hold it against you," I continued. "That kind of cruelty, it confuses people. Makes them question what they know, even who they love." I questioned myself, too. I walked to the head of the table and placed my hand on the back of my old chair. But this time last year, I was being erased in my own home. And today, I sit before you not as a victim, but as a woman who remembered who she was. The room was completely silent. Jason stood. "Mom," he started, voice hoarse. I shook my head gently. "Let me finish." I turned to Mia, whose eyes shimmered with tears. "And I want my granddaughter to remember this, that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hides in the quiet. In the tea you didn't drink. In the truths you whispered to yourself when no one else would listen." Mia stood, walked to me, and wrapped her arms around my waist. The room broke into soft applause. Not loud. Not performative. Just enough. Just right. After dessert, guests lingered. They asked questions. Some apologized. Some just hugged me. But everyone knew what had really happened. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a reclaiming. Jason stayed behind to help me clean. At one point, he stopped drying the dishes and looked at me. "She would have hated this night," he said. I smiled. Exactly. When the house finally quieted and the lights dimmed, I sat alone at the table for a few minutes. The same chair. The same candles. But nothing else was the same. This was no longer a house filled with fear. It was a home again. And now, only one thing remained, to tell you, my listener, why I shared this story. Because I know someone out there has felt like me, overlooked, discarded, called a burden. And I want you to know something: you are not alone. You are not weak. And if you've been silently suffering, waiting for a sign, this is it. But before we say goodbye, there's one final chapter. And it begins with a message, not from Isla, not from me, but from you. Come with me, one last time. To where it all began. Before we begin, if you followed this journey from the first chapter, I thank you from the deepest place in my heart. This story was more than a tale of betrayal and revenge, it was a voice for those who've suffered in silence. If it touched you, or if you saw yourself between the lines, subscribe my channel, and tell me, where are you from? Because every voice deserves to be heard. Especially yours. Now, for the final chapter. It was a cool, clear morning when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a call. A letter. Handwritten. Carefully addressed to me in a bold, unfamiliar script. The envelope was thick, heavy with intent. I opened it slowly, expecting, honestly dreading, some last shred of Isla's influence, perhaps a final manipulation from behind prison walls. But it wasn't from Isla. It was from a woman named June Carver. The sister of Denise Carver. The woman who vanished 15 years ago. The same woman I'd heard about in the voicemail. June had heard about the trial. She'd read the court transcript online. And in that envelope, she told me her story, the one that started long before Isla entered my family. Denise had met Lillian Grant in a shared apartment rental. The same manipulations. The same disappearances of money. The same whispers of medication being switched, sanity being questioned. Denise had filed a report. No one believed her. A few weeks later, she vanished. June never stopped looking. But it wasn't until Isla was arrested, and her real identity revealed, that June finally knew the truth. She ended her letter with a line I'll never forget: "You didn't just get justice for yourself. You got it for my sister. You made the ghost of a woman no one listened to finally feel heard." I wept. Not out of sorrow. But because for the first time, I realized that survival wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who never got the chance to speak. Everyone whose stories were buried beneath someone else's lies. Isla had been silencing women for decades. And she thought she could bury me, too. But I outlived her cruelty. I outlasted her venom. And I exposed her truth. And now, I live. Not quietly. Not invisibly. But fully. Jason has begun a foundation in Denise's name, helping women identify the red flags of psychological and financial abuse. Mia volunteers there on weekends. She reads every single letter we receive. Sometimes, she cries. Sometimes, she rages. But every time, she says the same thing before she files each one away: she would have wanted someone to listen. As for me, I still drink tea, made by my own hand, in my own kitchen, in my own peace. I tend the garden, repaint the trim, laugh louder than I used to. Because laughter now isn't a luxury. It's a victory. I tell my story not because I want pity, but because I want you to see yourself in it. If you are suffering in silence, speak. If you've been made to feel small, stand. If you've been called a burden, remember that even a seed is a burden until it blooms. You are not too old. You are not too broken. And you are not done. This was my story. But it might be yours, too. So if you're still listening, tell me, where are you from? Because someone out there needs to hear you next. And I'll be right here. Ready to listen.